And I've had this conversation on the show many times over the last few years. I had this conversation with Howard Marks before he died.
Right.
And he talked about this. And we've all seen the example that Portugal is with the decriminalization of drugs, which is different from what you're saying.
Yep.
But kind of there's kind of a few choices. It's the way it is now, which I think most people would agree is a mess. There is the decriminalization, the Portugal model, and then there is your model, the Bleksley model of legalize it all, regulate it all, have it down at the corner stop. And there's arguments for all three. Howard Marks actually said to me, he said, Brian, I have friends of mine that won't take something if it's illegal, if it's strictly illegal, and they'll stay away from these things. And so critics of your plan might say, if my kid goes to Boots and sees heroin on offer, cocaine on offer, they might be more likely to take it if it's in that package. Now, that's what some critics would say. That availability might give more access to people who would normally stay away from those back alleys and those things that are illegal. Now, what do you say to that?
There may be a spike in usage after the drugs are legalised and they're regulated and they're more readily accessible to all. There may be a spike in usage, but because I say we, the state, the government, will raise billions and billions in revenue from the sale of these drugs. What that will enable is that our children from primary school age will be educated about drugs. It won't be a taboo subject, which people don't want to go near. You know, my youngest kids were educated at school away from cigarettes. That all happened in school. And my kids, bearing in mind that my wife and I are foolish, filthy, smelly, idiotic smokers, my kids won't go anywhere near cigarettes. It was educated out of them when they were that big and they went to school. Now we will be able to afford to do exactly the same with drugs. Get in those schools, get to those children early. I'm not going to say we'll end up in a drug-free nirvana and in a generation's time we close all the drugstores down, because obviously we won't.
That will never happen.
That would be rampantly naive of me.
Yeah, and I had a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carl Hart who works at Columbia University in America, and he has a great TED Talk that's titled, Let's Stop Abusing Drug Users. And he implies or states that as humans, we all like to perturb our consciousness, whether it's caffeine or going to the movies or alcohol or cigarettes. But, you know, a lot of these legal drugs are drugs, caffeine and nicotine. Most people say that's not a drug, but it is. We like to experiment with our consciousness. That's what we do. Yeah. And we always will. And so there is no nirvana where people won't use drugs. But we have this current state where you're saying most of the crime is somehow drug related, somehow, whether it's money laundering, all of that. And you're saying that would be cut out if we did this. What do you...
Much of it.
Okay.
Now, bearing in mind that you would be taking organised crime's largest revenue stream away from them.
So they wouldn't go quietly.
So they're not going to give it up without a fight. But if you beat organised crime on three fronts, you leave them pretty much with nowhere to go. And that is price, purity, and availability. So you just beat them in all those regards. So those drugstores will have to be open 24/7. You know, those ones I clumsily named drugstores.
Right.
You know, so you beat them on availability, because if you close them at 2 a.m, the drug dealers will come out at 3 a.m.
Right.
know, so they'd have to be open. But petrol stations are.
But also,
it's really not a problem.
For example, London or the UK couldn't do this independently of the international community, could they? Because that would create a bunch of instabilities if it's legal here and illegal here.
Portugal led the way with their decriminalisation. There wasn't a Europe-wide 29-state kind of agreement there, okay? Someone has to be a pioneer. Someone's got to grasp the nettle and set the example. Canada and its legalisation of cannabis, you know, they struck out for freedom in that regard and did it. And it has its critics, I understand that. But so many of the critics of my standpoint, dare I say it, are Mrs. Miggins, who lives in the Cotswolds, perhaps, in her lovely country cottage, and is far removed from the streets of central London and our other great cities where young people are losing their lives in increasing numbers. And she might read the Daily Mail, for example, and go, legalisation, shock, horror, never. Well, unfortunately, Mrs. Miggins isn't really fully briefed and aware of what's going on. And I would have a message for her, and that would be, I would love to come to your cottage and have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and a chat with you about it. And I can guarantee that wheresoever she may be, as a complete stranger that I would be to that town, village, hamlet, whatever it may be, I reckon within half an hour I could source whatever I wanted in terms of illegal drugs. It's coming to your doorstep, Mrs. Miggins, if it's not already there, courtesy of county lines drug networks being established. Drug dealers are very inventive. They're always looking for new markets and new routes and new methods of smuggling, importation, transportation, and all of that. They're smart. That's what they do. We need to deny them this multi-billion pound industry.
Okay, what don't you like about decriminalization? Even as a method of getting to legalization, what don't you like about the Portugal model? Why can't
it's
we
a
do
halfway house?
Okay.
It's a halfway house. Come on. I think it should be all or nothing.
So how do you grade Portugal? What has worked and then what has not worked?
They're pioneers, and in terms of not penalising and criminalising problematic drug users, I applaud them endlessly for that. Again, through the billions that we raise, that we not only use in primary schools for education, but problematic drug users can get the help they need. And in so many cases, the help they want. It's not for us to dictate what help might be appropriate, but I guarantee you, many, many, many problematic drug users want help. They don't want to be the prey of their dealers. They don't want to be in the living conditions that they're in. They don't want to shorten their lives. They want help. We could afford to do that. This is about harm reduction and people's health, as well as denying the criminals control of that industry.
Okay, but the decriminalization is only half of the problem. That talks really more about the users, but you still have the dealers.
Yeah.
And that's still the same issues pretty much are happening in Portugal, and you're saying solve it all with one fell swoop.
Yeah, because dealers still get prosecuted in Portugal. You know, it's not now legal to deal. You can still get arrested and prosecuted.
Will drugs ever be legalized?
Yeah, oh yeah. The drug law reform movement in the UK is gathering pace every day. There are some wonderful people out there who make my opinions on it look like something clumsily scribbled on the back of a cigarette packet. You know, far brighter minds than mine, who have really thought it out in considerable depth. And slowly, bit by bit, politicians are coming on board. You know, an SNP, Scottish Nationalist Party MP proposed a bill last week in Parliament, you know, starting to go down this route, small incremental steps. Personally, I'd like to take one giant stride, one giant leap for mankind, perhaps, to go, right, organised crime, your days are over. We've got that industry now. Okay. They're moving into other things anyway. They're going into online crime, you know, and so much cyber crime and all of that. And some people are just determined to live a life of crime, and so they will be forced into something else. It won't all be rosy in the garden, I know. But in terms of the drugs industry, I would like our government, to control it rather than crooks.